This is Gemara Baba Basra Daf Kof Dalin. All the learning should bring an incredible zchus refuah shalema for Tinaik ben Miriam Ahuva b'siyata dishmaya. The koyach ha'Torah, koyach of Talmud Torah kenegei kulam should bring incredible Yeshuais and a complete refuah shalema to Tinaik ben Miriam Ahuva. We're holding on the bottom of Kof Gimel Amid Beis. We just finished the Mishnah. The Mishnah discussing a case in which someone sold an area, in the word of the Mishnah, mida bechevel, measured by rope. And on the flip side, where he did not say that it's going to be specific, but rather he said, afilu pachais ayoser. Rather, if he said it's an approximate. So now says the Gemara, what about the case smack in the middle? When it's precise, mida bechevel, that's clear. When it's clearly not precise, that's clear. Says the Gemara, in the beginning, the Gemara, the last line of Kov Gimel Amid Beis. Beis Kor Stama Mai. What if someone says, I'm selling you a Beis Kor? He didn't say it's approximate. He didn't say it's measured by a chevel. What's the halacha in that case? So Tashma says, let's bring a rayo. The Mishnah said Beis Kor Avrani Meichelacha. Mida bechevel. So in the first case, if he said explicitly, I'm selling you a base core based on the amount that you measure bechevel, meaning I'm selling you a precise measurement. Said the Mishnah as we turn over to Kuf Dalet Amid Aleph. Pichas kol shu yinake yeser kol shu yachser. Dot off, you subtract, you add on. Hastama, what's the obvious implication if he did not say explicitly mida bechevel? Hastama, if he just said it, stama, then what? Kein cheser ein yeser dami. Then it's like saying an approximate. But then obvious kasha, the steer and the yukinema seifa. What's the end of the Mishnah say? The obvious implication of the seifa is astama, is kimida bechevel dami. So says the Gemara, we have a classical stira and diukim in the Mishnah. We have a contradiction and implications, and therefore says the Gemara, ela meha leka lemashma mina. We cannot bring a raya from the Mishnah, and therefore tashima. Let's go on to a brisa to try to prove what is the case of base kor stama. 6 lines down, Kuf Dalet Amid Aleph, says the Gemara, Beis Kor Avrani Meichla Ke Beis Kor Avrani Meichla. So he either says a Beis Kor, or he says a approximate, or he says an approximate Beis Kor offer. Hey Chaser Ein Yeser Ein Meichla, and he says explicitly whether it's a little bit less, whether he gives a little bit less or not. Haiser Raiva. 1 second, I read it wrong. One more time. Hein Chaser Hein Yeser Ein Meichla. Or a third case says I'm selling you a base core offer, whether it's a little bit less or a little bit more. Then in any of these 3 cases, the halacha is because he clearly is saying an approximation. Alma, what do we see? Stamanami kein chaser in yaser dami. The first case was stama, and what does the brisa say? That this case of stama is lumped together with ein chaser ein yeser. Says the Gemara, no raya. Hasam perushika mefarish. Over there, we could say that we're explaining, meaning the brisa is not read as 3 separate and distinct cases, but rather, Ezehu beis offer shehi ke beis kor kegoyin darmalin chaser ein yeser. The way to read the brisa is that case 2 is explaining case what? Maskiv la Ravashi, asked Ravashi based on the way we just explained the brisa. Imkain, if that is true, ani moichel lecha, ani moicher loch, lamer li. Why did the brisa and in between each case say ani moichel lecha, ani moicher lecha, clearly implying that each one is its own case? If we're just explaining one after another, then clearly what should the halacha be? The halacha should be that it's three different cases. That's the halacha. The cases is three cases. Elalav shema mina. Rather, we have a raya the other way. Stamanami ki chasrin yesudam shema mina. We have a raya like we thought originally, that if you said stama, it is like you said it's an approximation, and we are yes indeed able to be paisha or shayla from this brisa. And we continue with the two dots smack in the middle of the Amud of Kuftalim and Aleph, which we quote the Mishnah. Ma'u lachzer laimois v'chulu, says the Mishnah. What does he return to him? He returns to him money, etc. The Mishnah explains that we have to, the whole reason that the buyer has to buy the extra land is l'toivas ha-moich. Therefore, if the meicher says, no, it's okay, I'll take the land back, we have to return it to him. So says the Gemara, from the Mishnah, it sounds like we create arkanas for the sake of the seller. But we do not create situations to aid the loikeach. Based off of that, asks the Gemara of Atani, we learned in a rice. Says the Braisa that what happens if the Meicher says, I'm selling you base core, an approximation, and he gave 7.5 kav less, or what's the halacha? The sale stands. More than that we said we forced the Meicher to sell the Lekeach to buy it. So what do we see over here? From over here, it sounds like that there's not an option to the Meicher, but rather it's compelled. Rather, he has to. So what do we see? It sounds like it's l'toivas both of them, not one-way street. Answers the Gemara, Hasam ki going to have yakira meyi kara. Says the Gemara over there when the Brisa says that we force him to sell, the reason is because Yakira meikara v'zol hashta. The case was the price of land was originally yakar, high, and now went down. And therefore, zol hashta amina lei ari avislei havli kizula the hashta. If you want to give him land at the lower current price. Whereas, and that's the reason why the Brisa says that we force the Meicher to sell, it means that if he says he wants to sell the excess, he has to sell it. You can sell it at the current lower price. However, really, the Brisa is agreeing that what we're coming to do is liyapais koichai shel Meicher. Ve'atanya, but ask the Brisa, shu noisin like a shar, shalokach mimenu. Says the Gemara, when the seller gives the buyer the excess land back, it says explicitly you give it back at the price that he bought it from and not the current price. Says the Gemara, Hasam over there, in that particular case, the reason was it started off cheaper and now the price went up. And that's the reason why the Bryce is teaching that we cannot force the buyer to purchase back, and that's the reason why. But in reality, we're sticking with the din of the Mishnah that we are indeed in it. Liapais koichai shel meicher. We continue 3 lines down, quoting the next segment of the Mishnah. Shemshir b'sadeh beis tes kavin v'chulu. If the meicher left over in the sadeh an area of 9 kav, then you get the land back and you can't be forced to buy it. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Nachman Amar Noisin Shivas Zumechsel Chol Kor V'Kor. Rav Huna comes along and says, when we talk about this Tes Kavin, that is even over a large area, a very big field, many core big. Even though it's only a fragment of the area, still you don't have to give it away. Rav Nachman says, no, you get 7.5 kavim for each and every core, even if it is a larger field. We turn over to Kuftalim Amid Beis, a more interesting Amid, as everyone can see. There's no taisis on this Amid. Straight up Rashbam, straight up Mefayresh. Obviously, not the simplest in Pshat, if it requires that amount of simple Mefayresh Rashbam to explain. But either way, says the Gemara as we turn over to Kuftalim Amid Beis, V'yika Milsa. Yisera Letishas Kabin, if there's a little bit more than the requisite 9 Kabin, then Hadre, then it is returned. That is the Machlokes of Nachman and Rav Huna, and that's Rav Nachman's explanation. So Eisvei Rav Nachman, Rav is not so happy. Shem Shayir Besada Beis Tishas Kabin asks Rava, if there's an area of 9 kav left over, then the buyer has to return it. Lav de Zabin Le Kurayim. It sounds clearly that we're talking about a case where he sold him 2 kor, and therefore the 9 kav is less than a quarter kav of the saw sold. Yet when the Mishnah says that you have to give it back, according to Rav Nachman, you keep the land. So says the Gemara, the math does not work out. Answers the Gemara, lo yidizavle kor. We're talking about a case where only sold him 1 kor. Ask the Gemara, comes along another kasha, bagina. What did the Mishnah continue? Beis chatzi kav. From there again, lavzav leisasayim. Says Gemara, no. Lo yidizavle leisa. But ask the Gemara further, according to Rabbi Akiva, Beis Raiva, if he overcharged by Beis Raiva, my lav dezavle leisa, lo yidizavle chatzisa. So even though the simple reading of the Mishnah would clearly, seemingly imply in each case that more was sold, but says the Gemara, no, we can make an akimta that it's talking about a case where he sold less. And of course, we just point out, anytime we have Gemaras like these, which are going to create readings of a Mishnah, which seem a bit far-fetched, we just have to remind ourselves, these are dichuis. Anytime you want to bring a raya from a Mishnah, has to be ironclad. Whereas if there's another way to drain the Mishnah, even if it's not the simplest reading, but if it's a plausible way of reading the Mishnah, then we'll say maybe that's what the Mishnah meant, and then you're not going to have a raya. What is the halacha if the land was originally a sadeh, a grain field, v'nasis gina, and then it became, you could use it as a garden, but no longer as a grain field. Meaning, the reason being, you need to have a lot of water to be a grain field, and therefore, there's not enough water at the moment. The opposite. To use it as a garden, it needs to have a lot of water, and that's what the field morphed into. Or gina v'nasis sadeh, says the Gemara. So in this scenario, do we say that now Lamaisa there's more usability to the land because it can be used in either a gina or a sadeh? Says the Gemara Teiku. We have to wait for Eliyahu Hanavi for that one. Tana, we learned in our brayso, Mayasam l'sadeyu. If the field was next to another one of the seller's field, a field that wasn't included in the sale, afilu kolju machzer loy karka. Even if you measured by a drop more, machzer loy karka. Why? Because the seller clearly wants that karka back. Why? Because it's right next door to one of his other fields. So boy Rav Ashi asked Rav Ashi bar ma'u shetafsik amasamayim ma'u shetafsik der charabim ma'u shetafsik. Ask Rav Ashi, how does it work if we have a bar that's between this field and another one of the seller's field? We have an amasamayim, an irrigational canal that's between the seller's field and this field, or the derech harabim is the path that's there. Ma'u shetafsik. Rechva dedikla ma'u shetafsik. We have a hedge of palm trees. Meaning, do we say that these are cases that it's right next door and therefore you have to return the field or not? Says the Gemara Teiku once again. We have to wait for an answer. We conclude quoting the final piece of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara Kalap Elayo. Logic, misvara. We would think the opposite. Misvara, we would think that the part beyond the requisite quarter kav, it would make sense that he has to return that land and not the area itself. Answers Gemara, you're right. A new way of learning was taught by Rav Bar Rav Nachman. Not only is the excess beyond the quarter kav you have to return, but you have to return all the extra. Indeed, like we thought that was the pashtus was to return the overcharged amount, and the chiddush was even the field itself. We'll pick it up for the next Mishnah, B'siyata Dishmaya.